Don't mention the war.
Are these Germans too?
Oh, yes, but I can do it.
Right. Here's the plan. I'll stand there and ask them if they want something to drink before the war. Before their lunch. Don't mention the war.
It's one of the most famous lines in television history, but what followed was anything but funny to the network executives. In a flurry of goose-stepping madness, John Cleese performed a scene so audacious it would eventually get his masterpiece, Fawlty Towers, pulled from streaming services around the world. To put it mildly, the scene crossed a line nobody even knew existed. But the thing nobody tells you is how this moment came to be, and why a joke from the 1970s ignited a firestorm in the 21st century. The birth of a nightmare. It was supposed to be a simple work trip. In the 1970s, the Monty Python crew checked into the Gleneagles Hotel in the sleepy seaside town of Torquay, England, expecting a quiet place to rest. What they found was a real-life monster who would become a comedy legend. The man in charge was Donald Sinclair, and to say he wasn't a people person would be the understatement of the century. The most shocking fact is, he wasn't just rude. He was a walking, talking hurricane of suspicion and hostility. He treated his guests not as customers, but as potential criminals plotting to ruin his establishment. For the Python team, it was like stepping into a bizarre alternate reality. You see, when Eric Idle left his briefcase in the lobby for a moment, Sinclair didn't ask who it belonged to. He immediately assumed it was a bomb. Without a second thought, he grabbed the case, ran outside, and hurled it over a 20-foot garden wall. The thing nobody tells you is that this wasn't even his weirdest moment. When American-born Terry Gilliam held his fork in what Sinclair deemed the wrong way at dinner, the hotelier marched over and physically moved his cutlery, publicly shaming him for his table manners. To put it mildly, the man was unhinged. While the rest of the Monty Python crew checked out and moved to a different hotel, one member was completely fascinated, John Cleese. He saw the pure, unintentional comedy in Sinclair's madness. Cleese, who stood an imposing 6 feet 5 inches tall, had always been an observer of life's absurdities. Born to a father who had legally changed the family name from Cheese to Cleese to avoid playground teasing, John grew up with a sharp wit and a mischievous streak. He once famously painted footprints leading from a school statue to a bathroom, making it look like the monument had wandered off in the middle of the night. What many overlooked was that this prankster was also a brilliant academic, who would go on to study law at Cambridge University. But his real calling wasn't the courtroom. It was comedy. And in Donald Sinclair, Cleese found his ultimate muse, a man so perfectly terrible at his job that he was a walking sitcom. He took notes, documenting every bizarre outburst and paranoid rant. Years later, he and his then-wife, Connie Booth, would use this real-life hotel nightmare as the blueprint for one of television's most iconic characters. But a character this chaotic needed more than just inspiration to work. The creation of Fawlty Towers is a story of incredible irony. The show, a brilliant mess of chaos and misunderstanding, was born from the collaboration of John Cleese and Connie Booth, a real-life married couple. They channeled the madness of the Gleneagles Hotel into a script, exaggerating the rudeness of Donald Sinclair and creating the unforgettable character of Basil Fawlty. But here's the twist. By the time they sat down to write the second and final season, their own marriage was over. They were divorced, yet they continued to work side by side, crafting comedy gold from a partnership that had personally fallen apart. It was a situation that would have broken most people, but for them, the creative magic was still there. The show first aired in 1975, and you can see this everywhere in entertainment. Critics just didn't get it at first. One review called it a disaster. They found the humor too fast, the situations too absurd, and the main character too unlikable. But the public felt differently. Viewers were instantly hooked by Basil Fawlty's manic energy, his explosive temper, and his hilariously failed attempts to run a respectable hotel. They loved the dynamic between the towering, frantic Basil and his sharp-tongued wife Sybil, the sensible maid Polly, played by Booth, and of course, the bumbling Spanish waiter Manuel. Each of the 12 episodes was a perfectly constructed farce, a pressure cooker of lies and panic that always ended in a spectacular explosion of comedic failure. What many overlooked is that the BBC almost canceled the show after its first 6-episode run. It was only after reruns started gaining a massive cult following that the network reluctantly agreed to a second season. This gave Cleese and Booth the chance to finish their masterpiece in 1979. It would be the last time they ever worked together. They poured everything they had into those final 6 episodes, creating a flawless ending to their creative partnership, even as their personal one was a memory. Decades later, Fawlty Towers is hailed as a work of genius, proving that sometimes the greatest art can come from the most painful situations. But one of those final episodes would create a firestorm that still burns today. A scene of infamy. This is where the story takes a dramatic turn. Of the 12 perfect episodes of Fawlty Towers, one would become infamous. It was titled The Germans, and it contained the scene that decades later would get the show temporarily erased from television. The episode starts with Basil suffering a concussion after getting hit on the head. You see, a regular Basil was already a walking disaster, but a brain-addled Basil was a Category 5 hurricane of inappropriate behavior. The timing couldn't be worse, as a group of German tourists is scheduled to check into the hotel. In a moment of panic, Basil gathers his staff and gives them one simple instruction: don't mention the war. Of course, the thing nobody tells you is that when Basil Fawlty tells you not to do something, he is absolutely 100% going to do it himself. And he does, in the most spectacular fashion imaginable. Within minutes, he's accidentally bringing up the war in every conversation. His attempts to take their dinner order spiral into a bizarre, rambling monologue filled with references to World War II. The German guests stare in stunned silence as Basil's concussion-fueled mania gets worse and worse. And then comes the moment that crossed the line. In a final, desperate attempt to communicate, Basil begins mocking Adolf Hitler, putting a finger under his nose as a mustache and performing a ridiculous goose-stepping march through the dining room. When the episode aired, the reaction was immediate and deeply divided. Many people in Britain found it hilarious, understanding that the joke wasn't on the German guests, it was on Basil. The scene was designed to make him look like a buffoon, a perfect example of British ignorance and obsession with the past, but many others were appalled. The BBC was flooded with letters of complaint. Critics called the scene tasteless and offensive for making light of such a painful part of history. In Germany, the reaction was just as mixed. Some saw the satire for what it was, while others, particularly those whose families had suffered during the war, found it deeply hurtful. The controversy was so intense that BBC executives seriously considered banning the episode for good. They ultimately decided against it, but the debate never went away. Fast forward to the 21st century, and the scene exploded into a new culture war. In 2020, UK TV, a streaming service owned by the BBC, quietly removed the episode from its platform, citing the use of racial slurs in a different scene within the same episode, involving the character of the Major. The backlash was enormous. Fans, and John Cleese himself, were furious. Cleese called the decision stupid, arguing that the show was not endorsing the Major's views but mocking them. He famously stated, "If you can't see that, if you think that is praising and approving of that kind of attitude, then you are a moron." The streaming service eventually reinstated the episode, but with a warning about offensive content and language. This single scene had become a battleground for debates on comedy, censorship, and cancel culture. But the legacy of the show is about more than just one controversial joke. Beyond the hotel walls, even with the firestorm that occasionally surrounds episodes like The Germans, the legacy of Fawlty Towers is an unshakable monument in the landscape of television comedy. Its shadow looms so large it's almost impossible to believe that only 12 episodes were ever made. In 2000, the British Film Institute didn't just praise it. They named it the best British television series of all time, a crown it has never truly relinquished. Its DNA can be found in countless sitcoms that followed, from the pacing and intricate plotting to the masterful blend of high farce and deep-seated human frustration. But the polished perfection viewers see today belies the turbulent reality of its creation. What became of the brilliant and arguably tormented cast who brought the chaos of that Torquay hotel to life? The answers are as complex and fascinating as the show itself. The story, of course, begins and ends with John Cleese. As Basil Fawlty, he created a character for the ages, a seething volcano of snobbery, rage, and existential despair, perpetually on the verge of eruption. After the hotel doors closed for good, Cleese remained a comedy titan. He co-wrote and starred in the universally acclaimed film A Fish Called Wanda, earning an Academy Award nomination for his screenplay, and became known to a new generation as the voice of King Harold in the blockbuster Shrek franchise. Yet Cleese has never been one to rest on his laurels or soften with age. Never shying away from an argument, he has become an increasingly vocal and divisive critic of modern woke culture. This stance has culminated in the controversial announcement of a Fawlty Towers reboot, which he is writing with his daughter, Camilla. The news has been met with both excitement and deep trepidation, as fans wonder if lightning can truly strike twice, or if this new venture risks tarnishing a perfect legacy. In stark contrast, Connie Booth, the show's co-creator, and the wonderfully composed Polly Sherman, chose a very different path. Her creative and personal partnership with Cleese was the engine of the show, but by the time the second series was being written, their own marriage had disintegrated. The pressure of writing together while separated was immense. After the show ended, Booth continued acting for a time, but in 1995, she quietly and decisively retired from public life. She left the madness of showbiz behind for good, retraining to become a respected psychotherapist in London, a career she has now practiced for over 2 decades, refusing all interviews about her past life. Her retreat into a world of healing and privacy is perhaps the most telling postscript to the on-screen bedlam she helped create. Prunella Scales, who played the unforgettable dragon-like Sybil, was already a distinguished actress when she took the role, and she continued a long and celebrated career on stage and screen for decades after. Her piercing laugh and withering put-downs became iconic, the perfect foil to Basil's frantic energy. Sadly, in her later years, her life took a poignant turn when she was diagnosed with dementia. In a move of incredible bravery and openness, she and her husband, fellow actor Timothy West, chronicled their journey with the illness in the beloved documentary series, Great Canal Journeys. The program revealed a painful truth. Even as her memory faded, her sharp wit and indomitable spirit, the very qualities that made Sybil so formidable, remained. Perhaps the most shocking part of the Fawlty Towers legend is the physical price Andrew Sachs paid for his art. The actor behind the lovable, perpetually confused waiter from Barcelona, Manuel, suffered real injuries on set. In one famous scene, a prop frying pan was meant to be used for a comedic hit, but it was accidentally swapped for a real heavy-duty one, leaving Sachs with a serious concussion. More alarmingly, during the filming of the episode The Germans, a chemical treatment used to create smoke for a fire scene soaked through his costume, causing second-degree burns on his arms and torso. Yet, he never complained, and his unwavering dedication to the role, even through physical pain, transformed Manuel from a simple stereotype into a genuinely beloved international icon. Sachs continued acting for decades before passing away in 2016, also after a long battle with dementia. The truth is, people watching a show this perfectly constructed are often looking for a mystery, for some secret ingredient that explains its genius. They wonder if all this happened overnight, if the brilliance was effortless. But the story of Fawlty Towers was the product of immense pressure, personal heartbreak, and even physical pain. Its genesis wasn't in a writer's room, but in a real-life hotel stay, where John Cleese encountered a shockingly rude hotelier named Donald Sinclair, the man who would become the blueprint for Basil. The chaos on screen was fueled by the very real, very human drama happening behind the scenes. A marriage collapsing under the strain of creative collaboration, and actors pushing their bodies to the limit for the sake of a laugh. It wasn't a fluke. It was lightning in a bottle, captured by a small group of incredibly talented people who gave everything they had. The key detail we might be missing is that the friction, the pain, and the pressure weren't obstacles to its success. They were the fuel that made it burn so brightly. So, what do you think? Can the biting satire of Fawlty Towers survive in today's world? Or is the reboot destined to fail? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe.